Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Uncommon Man Project podcast, where we dive deep into the realms of parenting, relationships, and communication. From our last podcast, we did mention we were doing a part two, so this is it. Today we are joined by Josh and Harry. Josh is just about to become a father, but he's got tons and tons of experience around teaching, guiding young souls from a mentoring perspective, whilst Harry has got a nearly 1 year old, and he's really been going through it and been navigating so many beautiful spaces where he's been able to grow, expand, and ideally today both of these incredible individuals can share what they've picked up along their way on their journey of either becoming a father, a mentor, a guide, as we dive into conscious parenting and maybe some of the big feelings, the concerns and the mistakes that we've all made in some way, shape, or form when communicating, connecting, maybe not being vulnerable enough or clearly communicating what our needs are and facilitating those safe spaces that really do allow for integrative, holistic change to take place within your family unit, within your parenting styles and connections. So today, think of it as a compass that we are offering you with a couple of different perspectives that could help you navigate some of the complexities of modern parenting and maybe even your relationships with your kids. So whether you are a seasoned veteran in this arena and you've got older kids, this could help. To be really honest, there's some of the practices in here you can use if you've got kids in their teens or even in their 20s, if they are open and receptive to connecting. It's very much a play on perspective, patterns, and accountability. So that being said, join us as we unpack these themes and share reflective questions and strategies over the next couple of minutes. Yeah, I'd like to actually start off with just understanding the importance of vulnerability and parenting as a whole. So Josh, on your side, you're becoming a father at this moment in time, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions on your side, and I'd actually like to start off where you are, because I think a lot of men are sitting there, and they may be questioning what that next step looks like when you go from this idea of being a father to actually stepping in there and having to help guide, mentor, support all these other roles and expectations that kind of just instantly happen in that moment when you do become a dad. So just from your space, like what are maybe some of the things where you are maybe concerned or question marks that you're currently holding in your conscious mind at this moment in time?
Well, one, I think I've been extremely blessed. One, because of the people around me. Just the three of us, we've sat around and had this conversation a lot and just tried to understand what might be coming up for me. And from my perspective, I have removed all expectations. I've literally I had all these ideas. I'm like, you start off with, is my kid going to be a gold medalist swimmer? Or, how am I going to get them to doing this? And then how do I get them so they've got this entrepreneurial spirit? Or are we going to send them to school? All these things, all these questions are like running through your mind. And you guys understand, time goes fast. As you get older, time goes faster. As you get kids, it's warp speed. Like I watch kids, my nieces and nephew grow up and I'm like, holy moly, you're going to be driving a car this year. So I've found the biggest thing to be like, right, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I've had Harry stories, I have Nick's stories, I have my friends' stories. So I've released all my expectations around that, even to the point where I have my goals and I'm very active. I'm very travel orientated and that is our life. But I had this conversation with my partner Fleur the other day. I was like, man, we're quite quiet at the moment, Fleur. Like, we're not talking about my old race, which had engulfed our entire life, and we're not talking about our future so much in our dreams. And I was like, and that's all right. It's kind of less exciting, but I'm learning to move with it because we haven't pulled the plug, but we're just waiting.
Sure.
So I don't want to have all these expectations. I don't want to set all these plans and these goals, and then suddenly you have this kid who doesn't sleep for 4 weeks straight, and you can't do any training, work's driving you mad, and you're yelling at each other. And I was like, okay. And so I've gone back to the model that Harry shared, and I'm like, my job is to make sure Fleur doesn't die. Fleur's job, make sure the kid doesn't die. I'm like, that's kind of my baseline now. I'm like, sweet. I'm going to, those are going to be my focuses. From like the fathering, communication, vulnerability type, I started off in education. Like, I've mentored and taught over 2,000 young men. That's a lot of conversations. That's a lot of stories. That's a lot of different individuals and things. And I'm sure we'll dive into it today, but there are so many things I learnt from that about kids and about other parents as well, and about their expectations of the potentials of the kids and the struggles that they have with them, that I feel an overwhelming sense of confidence. And this could be an absolute black hole that I'm stepping into, having that. But I'm like, I think it's there that I can navigate my way through. But this is the thing. This is why I have the confidence. The next thing is the most important thing. It's because I know if I fuck up, I know how to deal with fuck ups, and I've got people in my life who I can lean on. Like, that is number one. I know that I'm not alone.
Yeah.
So I think that's massive, because let's be honest, bro, I'm still scared as hell. Like, I'm still like, fuck, I've got a kid coming. Like, shit, what if business takes a turn? What if suddenly I can't train? And if I'm not training, man, you know the kind of person you are if you're not moving. Like, I'm not a great person to be around. There's suddenly these things. How am I going to deal with those? And I'm like, I know, and I am certain, which is, there are not many certainties, that I've got great people in my corner. Like, that is the key for me. Because I'll be honest, I have no fucking idea what I'm going to do. No idea.
Look, at least you're honest. I think a lot of guys walk in here and they're like, no, I've got this thing. I've maybe read a book. I've skimmed through a podcast, and here I have an idea of how to facilitate being a good father. So, look, Harry, you're on a different side of the spectrum. Your little ones obviously popped out. You spent nearly a year with them, and just to start off with the first half of that question, how important would you say it is for you to embrace vulnerability to facilitate more connection with your son, especially in those big moments where he's maybe experiencing a lot of emotion, where possibly you're even worked up, where things are just essentially, tits up? Like, what does that look like for you?
Similar to what Josh said, I think in removing that expectation that I have to have all the answers, or that I have to know exactly how to handle this situation, and having that level of, or I guess that standard for myself, not just with Jax but with Liv even, but being able to have that humility to say, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to handle this. I've like to think I would have enough. I have enough consciousness to be able to, okay, I can logically think my way out of this. But even going into parenthood, I had nothing to compare it to. I used to think, well, I'm pretty good. I like to think I'm pretty good at controlling my stress, controlling my emotions. And, the closest thing that I had to, I guess, being tested and being patient was when Liv and I were on a ski hill, right? She had barely snowboarded before, and I go just about every season, so I'm pretty well versed on the mountain. And she's like, "Oh, I'm going to be so slow. I'm falling over." And I'm like, you know what? I don't really care. I'm just want to be with you. I just want to spend the time with you. I'll teach you how to board. And we're just going up and down the beginner hill. Like, I think out of 4 or 5 hours, I did like one solid run, and I wasn't trying to I wasn't trying to rush her. I wasn't frustrated. Like, oh, would you just fucking get it? Hurry up. Just get up. It's not that hard. Like, I wasn't in that kind of state. I was happy to just teach her something, to spend it with her, to do that, to have that experience. And so that's, in my mind, what I was expecting fatherhood to kind of be like. Okay, he's not going to get it. He's going to be like this little retard that I'm going to have to teach everything. And it's going to be testing. It's going to be slow. It's going to be all these things. The thing that I didn't factor in was it's going to be a while before he can talk and communicate what's going on. So his way of talking and communicating is just crying and screaming. So when your patience and tolerance and everything is being tested, and then on top of that, it's being tested because you've got this thing screaming at you that you're also trying to figure out what's wrong, or like what to do about it. It pushes that into a whole new level of control of how do I absorb this energy and this emotion so that he can see how we regulate and how we kind of handle these things, rather than being a mirror and just throwing it right back at him and expecting him to be the one to then get it, stop, change emotional state, which, first of all, takes a lot of emotional maturity and control. So if I can't do it at 31 years old, fat chance he's going to do it at 10 months old. So being able to take that and swallow that, so that I'm reflecting how I want him to change. So if he's getting worked up and, a little bit hysterical, how do I then practice that calm and empathy, vulnerability, and so that he can see how we control ourselves, how we handle these situations, instead of just becoming this match of throwing this energy back and forth until someone breaks something, screams, or like it doesn't end well.
You're onto something there. And I think a lot of guys get stuck and sucked into that interaction because logically you're like, but this isn't logical what you're doing. This just doesn't make sense. Like, it's not a big thing. But to that child in that moment, their world has ended. And they are having the biggest emotional breakdown and expression because they don't have the words to communicate this. They, at this moment in time, let's say between, 6 months to a year or 18 months, they possibly still feel safe enough to express that in front of you. Let's say if you're doing a moderately good job at being a parent, and they're sharing that with you, and they're like, this is all in me and I just have to let it out. So out of curiosity, what is the maybe the first time this happened to you and you were having to have one of these, very vulnerable, empathetic, compassionate exchanges, well, ideally, with your son? Like, what did you do that maybe didn't work initially? How did you react? And then from that, what were some of the learnings that you've now been able to integrate into practice the next times that he's maybe had a breakdown or had to express himself? And you obviously saw that didn't work, that worked a bit better, I'm on the right track. What are you doing now? So from then to now.
So in the first few times or first few weeks of trying to figure this out, of being in that space, it was like frustration, like especially when the cries and it hits that pitch, that real like guttural cry, which if anyone heard that would think this thing is being murdered. Like, I have no idea how blind people parent. Like, if you just heard the scream without seeing the facial expression of like, oh, nothing's really that wrong, but you just heard the sound, you'd think it was the end of the world. And so when that is climbing and you feel that frustration, that anger, because I forget who I heard this articulate anger from the other day, but they were saying anger is just almost like a lack of options. Like, you get angry because you don't know how to handle a situation, which kind of makes sense. For me, I can resonate with that a lot. A lot of those situations, anger comes up because I don't know what to do. So it's almost like, well, I don't know how to logically think my way out of this or handle this. So I'm just going to brute force, almost, violence comes up. Shut the fuck up. You want to use violence, and use that, which obviously that's not going to, unless you knock them out, which is not helpful. It's not going to help the situation. You're just going to scream louder.
Yeah.
And a conversation with Josh really helped me around using the emotional toolbox. And so in the past, maybe getting frustrated, getting angry, and then returning that emotion back to him was not helpful. Wasn't helping the situation, wasn't helping him. I wasn't feeling any better. Like there was no one benefiting from this exchange. And so the emotional toolbox that Josh equipped me with was, well, okay, that viewing emotions as tools. So that tool of frustration or anger, is that the tool for the job right now? I tried it, not very helpful. What else we got? Okay, is maybe empathy? Is maybe some calm needed? Is maybe some vulnerability needed? Like, try on those different emotions and see which one then elicits a better result. And so in practicing that, like getting to the point now where I can sit and hold him and he can be screaming about whatever's going on and I'm trying to calm him down, feeling absolutely no emotional rise in me at all. I don't feel like my temper is boiling. I don't feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm about to throw this guy if he doesn't shut up any second right now. I can just sit there. And for me, it might sound strange to someone that hasn't experienced this before, but you feel this immense amount of power. Like you feel like you have this power of being able to sit in this storm unfazed. And for me, that's what I imagine he is looking for. He's looking for this stability that, okay, he can express this emotion and my dad can handle it. Dad can take the brunt of this emotion and help me to figure out what I'm feeling and what's going on. Obviously, he can't say that in any words yet, but getting to the point where he feels safe to express that, knowing that I can handle whatever he throws at me and it's going to be okay. I'm not going to lose my shit. I'm not going to make him feel like he's a horrible son for expressing those emotions. He's not going to then, I guess, take that as his own, so that as he then does get older in being able to articulate these expressions, that he can then still express those emotions and we can work through that together, knowing that, okay, I'm not perfect, but I can handle it without throwing it back in his face.
And then what type of adult do you think you build from doing that?
Build a controlled, resilient adult, right? Like I think if you can sit in that space, everything else becomes a breeze. Like comparatively, if you can sit there with a screaming child with which you don't know what's going on, like all these unknown variables, and it's different when you've got something like actively trying to get your attention and scream and cry and doesn't know what it wants. You pick it up, it screams, you put it down, it screams, you feed it, like it's all over the place. And you can still maintain that composure. Everything else becomes a breeze. Right. And then so one of the frames that a selfish frame that I viewed it from was also, if I wanted to be that stoic dad, that powerful, that in control dad from every aspect, how would I have to earn that trait? Like, I clearly wasn't that level beforehand. So these are just little testing blocks along the way of being able to earn that space, so that as he gets older, he's going to throw more shit at me and I'm going to be tested again. But I have to earn my stripes in this level before I'm able to handle more. And I want to get to the point where as he grows up and he's got more complex stuff going on in his head, that he's able to express that and articulate that rather than feel like, oh, dad will get angry if I say this or if I express this. And then he bottles all that up and expresses that in some unconstructive way. So now he knows. Go on.
So sorry to interrupt you there, but you're essentially what you're creating is an environment where there's empathy, where there's vulnerability, and where there is, the building blocks of open communication. I actually want to dive into Josh over here. So you've maybe seen more of the end product at this moment in time. You've worked with kids that are a bit older, and obviously a wide variety of different homes and situations and variants and conditions. if you were to like look at the polarity between your experience of a household where you could kind of gauge parents taking more of this empathetic, compassionate approach, where they are recognizing, okay, child is feeling unsafe, they were expressing themselves, my job is to stay calm, cool, help them navigate that, validate their experience, versus the reactive, I'm triggered, my childhood is coming up right now because I was dismissed or I was, knocked around, and I'm very agitated, very aggressive, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, those two very different situations. What is your experience, I suppose, even as a third party, and then just any comments on what we've been talking about?
Well, the funny thing is, and guys will recognize this as soon as I talk about it, because what Harry has basically talked about is how our ego shows itself up in our parenting. And anyone who's ever been through education, because that's where my experience is in terms of kids, and they've had that teacher that they just hated, and that teacher just always seemed to have a pain point with them, was always putting them in detention, always doing these things. I was like, it was funny because the teachers who were great and had that place of like, fuck, pour your shit on me, whatever, I can take it, it's okay, compared to the teachers who were like, fuck it, I'll flip this straight back on you. They were the ones that with all the behavioral problems. They were the ones with always the kids that were kicking up stinks in their classroom. They were the ones with always the kids in detentions. They were the ones always having conversation with parents. I'm like, that's an exhausting way to live, whether you're a teacher or a parent. That is an exhausting way to live. Always bringing up your shit, throwing it back, it gets thrown back. And it's just vice versa. Whereas the person, the parent, the teacher who never backed a kid into a corner, number one, always have an option. You back anybody into a corner, let alone a kid. You've got to remember, reptilian brain versus frontal, fully developed lobe, you're hoping by the time, for us men, by the time we get to 36, against a kid who's literally hormonal, reptilian brain, like, try backing that into a corner. What are you doing? And you do that by raising up your own ego, by going, you're hurting me, therefore I'm going to hurt you back. And they try to back them into a corner. And the simple aspect was always have a couple of options and listen. Just listen. And this is where it gets awesome. This is where like the best thing happens. So listening to a podcast by Dr. Becky Kennedy, but phenomenal what she just pointed out, which a lot of people who are great communicators will do it naturally. A lot of people are great parents naturally, great teachers naturally. And it comes from relationships, comes from communication. And it's this, you have to have something break in order to actually have a fantastic connection with your child, or in my case, a student. You actually have to have this layer up or something that just goes wrong in the communication to actually increase the connection between somebody. So you have to get something wrong in order for it to be even better than it was. This is so important for parents out there, because parents think that they're going to parent their kids perfectly and their kids are going to grow up with no childhood trauma or unconscious beliefs about a lack of self-worth. I'm like, throw that in the bin, because you might forget an extra piece of tomato in your kid's sandwich, and that kid may make up a story that you don't love them and they're not worth anything. They're going to make the unconscious mind's a credible thing. But this is the beautiful thing about repair. You have a bad conversation or a blow up or a conflict with your kid, and now you have the greatest opportunity you'll have for more connection. And that is, breaks it down to 3 steps. First things first, the conscious awareness that, okay, I fucked up. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have yelled. I shouldn't have tried to headbutt my kid. I shouldn't have done all these things, right? I'm a bit of an idiot. This is not a good thing. Second part is like, but I am human. And I do need to forgive myself for not being perfect. And it's this idea of perfectionism that holds us back. Oh, but I've got to be perfect. I've got to be the perfect parent, because otherwise my kid's going to have childhood trauma. Welcome, your kids are going to have childhood trauma. Like, doesn't matter where you grow up. Then, once you've had the awareness that it's happened, 2, forgiving yourself for actually, okay, I'm not perfect, right? The third piece is the best piece. That is the repair. Because then you can say, and Harry and I were talking about this just earlier, then you can say, hey, Simon, my son, I behaved not in the way that I expect myself or any man to behave, and I apologize for yelling. This is where this is the important piece, because if you stop there, you do a really, really good job. If you suddenly use the word but, you've just fucked up the whole thing. But Simon, you shouldn't have done X, Y, Z. Now the kid's back in the corner, just wants to fight you again. It's like, no, ownership. Like, I shouldn't have yelled. That's below my standards. Next time, I'll do better. X, Y, Z. Then you can go a step further and go, this is how I want to be. This is how I want to step up. This is what I'm going to do in the future. How can we do this better together? How can we make this work? And then I'll take you back to how that worked in the classroom. I now didn't have an enemy. I had a fan. I had the kid who would turn around and go, shut up, Mr. Hamilton's talking. Do your work. And that's a whole change. Suddenly you had this kid who was like, you're such a dick, Mr. Hamilton, like, fucking rah, 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 to being like, Mr. Hamilton's the man. Look after him, otherwise I'll smash you. Whole game change. But you can do that with your own kids.
I think you're onto something there. I'd even like to say a fourth step to add to that. And this changed my experience, especially with my kids that are now 5 and 8, from that 3-year phase where they're obviously starting to lose their shit. Everything is just big and the world is ending. And my 5-year-old is very emotional, but he's explosive. My eldest one, he holds on to shit for days. He remembers stuff that happened last month. And clearly that's not a healthy way to look at it, but that's how he looks at it. So at this moment in time, we've gotten better. So where I would sometimes step into my default mode, which would be, you go in for correction, you're disciplining through conversation, connection, all the above. Let them get the emotions out, talk to them a bit, keep it under 3 minutes so that you can guide them, you show them. Eventually that would be happening. But that last step, which is reconnection, where you are focusing on, hey, that there was just, that was maybe an explosive moment. It was a moment of overwhelm. It was a moment of reactivity. That was whatever it was. But that is not bigger than how much I love and care for you as an individual, as a person. And you're putting their worth and their value in its own box. It's got fuck all to do with what they're busy doing. Like, I see you as a person. That there changed the game. And that was that thing of where you come in and you take accountability and you say, yes, like, I fucked up. I'm sorry. But I still do. Time and time again. Like, I'm sorry. Like, when something that I, just, and here's a small thing for like, let's say parents, if your kids get older, as parents, we often say in a minute, or when I finish this, just wait. And yet we expect children to respond to us straight away. We may not see that what they are doing is important in that moment, but it is to them. And it's a thing of, you're also not recognizing the importance of these moments, of these spaces where you choose connection and vulnerability over being right.
I ask a question because I don't want people, I think there's like this fork in the road, or almost like the swing. It's like, I was brought up in the 80s. I had the wooden spoon, the smack, all those sorts of things. And now it's like, and now the pendulum's the other way. And it's like this idea of conscious parenting. And they're like, yeah, but my kid's got free will, free choice. So, if, my kid's like, yeah, but I want chocolate ice cream for dinner. I don't want to eat broccoli. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, that's understandable. I want to service. That's fine. You've got needs and you've got freedom of choice, so that's okay. I'm like, no, that's not okay. Your kid does not have a conscious brain to make a relative decision between what is good for him or her right now. And this is where I kind of want to say, well, what do you do in terms of, you're a very conscious parent, you're very good at what you do in terms of that, and you have a skill set, your background is in mentoring and coaching. What do you do for discipline? Because I don't want people to think like, oh, Nick and these guys that don't discipline their kids, is just the kids wander around. It sounds like they own the place. What do you do now?
I'm going to throw this. I'm just going to just verbalize this. The same way that you wouldn't, like, let's say your mate says something wrong to you or gets something wrong. Are you going to go and hit your mate with a belt? No, just saying. Well, then you've got some other issues. But like, logically speaking, if an adult did the exact same thing, are you going to go and beat them? No. How do we still expect that model to work? And you can see just through the percentile of millennials that are currently going no contact with their parents. I'm in a household where we're doing that. We've done 6 months. Easy. No contact. Why? Because of those beliefs. Because I'm going to take a wooden spoon. Because there's a saying, that's like very predominant in that culture, which is child is dog. That's the mentality that they hold kids in. The child is expected. No, it sounds like primal, but this is where people are at with the pecking order. Oh, my kids are my retirement plan. My kids will sort out the house. My kids will have to take accountability and responsibility for the lack of parenting, the amount of negligence. No. Like, here's the thing. If you are wanting to discipline your kids, your role as a parent is to facilitate a safe space, to mentor and to guide. And to be honest, if you do a good enough job just in that, trust that your kids will actually want to have a relationship with you as an adult because you respected them as an individual. They're not an asset. They're not a bag. They are individuals that are learning to express themselves and have the right to do that. Does that mean that when your 3-year-old comes to you and says, I'm not going to eat anything other than chocolate cake right now, that you're going to say, no, honey, that's okay. You're going to eat your chocolate cake. That's fine. And it's 8 o'clock at night. You don't have to brush your teeth. No, because then you're being negligent. Like, logically speaking, being a good parent doesn't mean that you are liked by your kids. I've had this conversation with my kids, which is, hey, so, and I'm very, very upfront with them because I don't see kids as being these stupid little beings running around. They're very sharp. They're very perceptive. I'll be outright and honest with them and say, look, it's 7 o'clock right now. Right, guys? Yes. And they could be had a temper tantrum or they were not wanting to eat supper. And I'll say, okay, so here's what's available to you. You said you want to eat this, but mom's cooked you a really nice meal. Okay? Are you guys growing? Yeah, we're growing. Do you think that that is going to help you feel bigger and stronger and help your muscles grow? No. Well, that, yes, because it's got protein, it's got vegetables. Well, why do you think we made that? Well, to help us, help our bodies and help our minds. I ask them questions. I don't just direct, I redirect through asking them questions. Very simple questions, like the same way as you would in sales and marketing, like keep it like grade 1 to 3, like very simple questions. And then it's like, oh, the onus is back. That makes sense why we're doing that. I might not necessarily like it, and we'll hold that, as a reference point. Okay, you don't like that. We'll try and facilitate and give you something a bit different that's also really healthy. If my child is having an 8-year-old, hormones are coming in, bangs the door. Does it help that I open the door with anger and aggression, run and storm after the child, and then say, what the are you doing? Like, you don't bang your door in my house. This is my house. Like, the standard protocol that most men would go for, I want to seem bigger and more scary. Like, how is that going to help? So now your child looks back, dad's having a temper tantrum. He's throwing a temper tantrum because he wants to feel bigger and stronger in that moment. because someone stepped on some invisible line, and now you're going to be met with more angst, more aggression. So you look at the behavior that you are modeling. In those moments, it's a thing of, okay, I'm going to take a breath. Because in my house, what happened is if I banged the door, that would have been the response. So I'm like, I'm not that guy, number one. So I refuse to act like that. That took time. That took a lot of work. So if you want to talk about disciplining your kids, you have to be disciplined within your own healing and reparent the fucking shit out of yourself. That's not read a book or listen to a podcast. That is you showing up every single day. And when I hear guys, oh, I've done this, or dude, have you been to therapy? Have you like worked on this actively every single day? Even if I'm not doing the latest in coaching, I'm doing parenting things every single day, because that is the root cause for 99.9% of your problems, because you've taken on all those behaviors and patterns. And that's where it starts.
Generational wealth thing. That's the break.
Yes. So you then have to make a conscious choice in your discipline, which is not, change the word. It is you're guiding another human being to be a better human being and to better navigate, respond and not react to the environment, to stimulus. Yes, and if you were flooded with hormones, it's also a lot harder. So give that child grace. And it comes back to what we said at the beginning of this podcast, which is the compassion, the empathy, the vulnerability, the safe space. Try and go tell your 15-year-old daughter, try and hit them head on with, some language jargon, trying to prove a point when their hormones are through the roof, and they'll probably slice you with a knife with their words. That's not going to work. You're going to sit there, and if you facilitated a safe space from when they were young, they'll know wow, I'm going through a lot of shit right now. This person loves me and accepts me for who I am. And they will recognize themselves, oh, I had a moment. They'll come to you and say, I'm sorry that I felt this way and I was looking at it this way. I didn't get it right. Hormones. That's what you want. There's accountability. The same thing that you should have been modeling during those formative years. So discipline happens with modeling. It also happens with self-accountability. And it happens with you being conscious enough about yourself and the patterns and things that are maybe still sitting in the background that have been running your life to this point, and you being willing to rewrite it. If someone comes with bullshit and say, you don't have enough neuroplasticity, after 40, you can't change, go fuck off. Then you go do that. I'm so adamant on this shit, because I've seen guys change at 70, at 75.
100%. 100%.
Change is a choice. And the thing is, if you're willing to bite into all these old narratives and sayings, and your life is really difficult, be it with your parenting relationship or the relationship you have with yourself or the relationship that you have with your partner, that's a choice. And it's a thing of easy choices, difficult life. Difficult choices, easy life, or easier life.
I think one of the things to reiterate here, especially for parents who maybe they're listening to this and they're going, fucking hell, this is all news to me, or parents who would just feel like they're doing it wrong all the time. It's change isn't overnight. You're going to fuck this up. Your kids are going to come up with some crazy unconscious belief about their self-worth later in life that they get to work through. They get to. And I say get to because it's really important that you have challenges in your life that you actually have to change, because it grows you to be the person that you want to be. Like Harry said, you get the test now and then later the test is bigger, but you're bigger. So everything works. So just those guys who are going through it, take these lessons, put them to practice. You will fail, but you will fall forwards, and that's okay.
And just to be really honest, I fucked up the first 3 to 4 years with my eldest son. I saw it. I've seen it. And a lot of the controllables, I didn't believe in myself that I could control those things. I really fucked up. It's taken years to get to a place where it's oh, I see you as dad and I trust you and I see what you're doing. and that consistency. It's every single day that you're making this decision, and you're not going to get it right, and no one is asking. But if you can do better than what was done when you were growing up, and maybe you were 1 in a million where you had great parents and they were present and amazing, absolutely amazing. Like, I'm really happy for you. And it's not everyone's experience, but if you've had a tough hand that you were dealt and you're wanting to make a change, like, it's going to require effort and accountability. Just to leave you guys with a couple of questions. The first one is, how can you incorporate vulnerability and empathy into your daily interactions with your family? What are some challenges you face in being fully present and regulated when you address them? And lastly, in what ways can you foster a stronger sense of connection and belonging in your family unit?
So guys, if you want to learn more about becoming a high performer, whether that's in your business, as a father, as a husband, or just in your own personal journey, we have an absolutely amazing free group that's got over 20,000 men in there. And we have an amazing guide system in there that'll walk you through a 7-day nervous system reset and a whole bunch of other guides and assets in there that'll help you become the man you want to be. So if you want that, just click the link and come on over and join the group.